Hello, God bless and welcome. I'm Kevin Haggerty. This is my partner, Jim Howard. Say hello, Jim.
Hello, guys. How's it going?
We are recording again, and we're having some pre-show debate over if it's a giant conspiracy theory or if I just don't know what I'm doing, which could go either way. The giant conspiracy thing wouldn't surprise me, though. Artificial intelligence, Elon Musk said, is a greater danger to our democracy, to our republic, than nuclear holocaust.
Yeah.
So we'll see. I don't know what's going on. So, but we have, in terms of conspiracy theories coming true, we have kind of an interesting show today. We have a kind of almost a heartbreaking topic that we've seen locally here, by the way, in Pasco County in Florida, but now we're seeing it on a national level. So explain to them what we're going to talk about and kind of what it looks like. We've done a little homework on this. Both of us have. It's funny that we were both looking into the same thing this week.
Well, there was a memo put out by the director of it was put out from the Attorney General to the partnership among federal, state, local, tribal, and territorial law enforcement to address threats against school administrative board members, teachers, and staff. And it's a little unnerving that the federal government is going to step in. Now, all of us, if you've been paying attention to the news, all of us have seen school board meetings that have been
raucous, like getting out of hand, sort of.
Well, parents are passionate when you're talking about their kids. Any parent should be passionate when you're talking about their kids.
Yeah.
And so when parents are kind of tired of critical race theory, pushing the transgender, to where
even masking 5-year-olds.
I mean, there's a whole slew of things going on here that the school board has or the Teachers Association, really, if you want to know the truth behind it, it's the Teachers Association, have started to, parents are becoming more and more concerned. Parents are looking into what is being taught. Their son comes home and the mother says, "What were you taught today?" And it's a white kid, and he goes, "Well, I'm taught that I'm privileged and that I'm racist and that I can't get along with my black friend that lives across the street because, critical race theory says that this just doesn't happen. You're inherently racist." And we've seen black parents, we've seen white parents, we've seen all different types of parents get involved in this conversation. But yet, the Department of Justice comes in and says coordination and partnership with local law enforcement is critical to implementing these measures for the benefit of our own nation's nearly 14,000 public schools districts. And he's talking about the department takes these incidents seriously and is committed to using its authority and resources to discourage these threats, identify them when they occur, and prosecute them. Well, you have to ask the question, what is considered a threat? And so some of the now the National School Board Association sent a letter to Joe Biden wanting him to invoke the Patriot Act in regards to domestic terrorism, and it's and they list these incidents.
I'm showing the letter right now. We're looking at the letter from the National School Board Association to the Honorable Joseph R. Biden, President of the United States. And so the concern here is that they want to treat parents parents that get out of hand at a school board meeting as a domestic terrorist, like they might treat naming a domestic, like the Aryan Nation or something like that. I don't know what's a good example of a domestic terrorist organization.
I would think
I'll Google that while we're talking.
I think the Proud Boys could be listed.
Yeah, they're probably on that list.
Yeah, QAnon. I mean, they were kind of out there for a while. But here's some of the complaints that were made. Someone made prank calls. A resident in Alabama who proclaimed himself as vaccine police has called school administration while filming himself on Facebook Live. And it's like, okay, why is that a threat? And it says the article NSBA cites actually refers to an incident involving a pharmacy, not a school. But it's like, we're going to put it out here because it says something about vaccination police, another guy in Michigan prompted the school board to call a recess because of opposition to critical race theory. What does that mean, opposition to critical race theory? Was he loud, boisterous? Did he make threats or something like that? But they don't even go into it. They don't.
Right. So if they talk about harassment, threats and harassment were the terms they use. And here, that's where I would have the problem. So violence is violence, right? Although we've gotten in the habit of calling words violence, violent speech or whatever, which is not, it's just not a thing, right? You can't speak violence. You can call for violence, but my saying something to you and you taking it as violent speech doesn't mean that you can then be physically violent with me, and it's justified because I was verbally violent with you in the first place. So that's kind of a ridiculous argument. But what would a threat be? Are they threatening to burn down their house, kidnap their kids, or are they threatening to not vote for them? Because there's some threats that are okay.
Yeah, well,
right?
Some of them, I have heard some of the threats that other people have listed. I mean, if you go to some of the left-leaning side, they'll say things like, that I voted for you, I can get rid of you, I can but by saying I voted for you, I will not vote for you next year, which is what they should have said. But we can get rid of you, which means that that's kind of it. We voted you in, we'll vote you out.
Yeah.
But yet, people take that as a threat, they're going to get rid of me. How are they going to get rid of me? I mean, other groups, particularly Turning Point USA. Now, this is what's listed in this complaint, though. I think we have to be very careful here because you and I could go and watch hundreds of hours of video in reference to school board meetings and kind of look at it and go, yeah, that's a little out of hand. Yeah, that's a little, but a lot of these that I'm watching, because I've gone out like we talk about doing our research, and we see it all the time on the news. When I go out and watch them, they're just passionate parents. There's a difference between pushing over a barricade to get into the school, and then, with pitchforks and torches.
Breaking windows and things like that.
Windows,
so,
sure.
So do they have, I didn't see where they had a specific example of a threat of violence or violence itself.
They don't. That's the thing.
If the harassment is we are going to wait outside until you let us in, right?
Right.
If the harassment is we're going to hold signs in the back of the school board meeting till it's our turn to speak, or not leave when it's over because we haven't had a chance to speak. So they have to draw a line somewhere. The problem is they don't define any of these things, right. So it could mean anything. Well, and in our heads it means some people that want it to be true. Harassment and threats sounds very different to somebody that wants it to be true than somebody that may not want it to be true. Does that make sense?
Sure. But I think it goes deeper than what we're looking at. I think it goes deeper than kind of like this outcry of parents getting involved. We have let school boards for years dictate what our children are going to learn. Mm. And parents have not been involved. And so they continuously push it further and further. I mean, we got rid of prayer. To me, that should have been all right, we're gonna march on this one.
Yeah. Before our time.
But it's before our time, right. But parents just kind of like said, okay, that's a small battle. Johnny, just say a little silent prayer. Yeah. Don't cause any stink or anything like that. But yet we didn't. So we went into sexual education. Remember, we had sex ed for 7-year-olds and 8-year-olds, and parents started to kind of say, "Whoa, I don't."
That's very young.
That's very young. I want to know what you're teaching. I want to see what the curriculum is, and I want to know. Maybe I want to opt my child out. Now, this caused a little bit of controversy. COVID caused controversy because they want to mask, 4 and 5 and 6-year-olds, where the science points at it and says, that's not that, we shouldn't have to mask them. And the thing of it is, I was listening to somebody the other day, and listen, any child who gets COVID, gets sick, ends up in the hospital is a terrible thing. But when you looked at the numbers were tiny. I mean, it was like very small.
So that is the problem is it's almost a fear-mongering type thing. They know that something someone like me would respond to is is a threat to my children, right?
Right.
So COVID's going to kill your kids. Now, all of a sudden, I may not have taken COVID very serious yesterday, but now I'm taking it serious because I wasn't worried about me, but I am particularly worried about my kids. So they use statistics that they use numbers that can be misleading if not unpacked, right?
Well,
so
yeah.
The amount of hospitalizations, it can't be the standard. I've said it before, but it can't really be the standard because they could just admit more people to the hospital, right? So the policy then could become anybody that presents with COVID, you need to admit, right?
Right.
Now they don't have any more. They're not sending them home anymore, but they don't have any more cases either.
Right.
Nor are they so serious that they need that.
Right.
They don't meet the standard that they met a week ago in terms of seriousness. But liability-wise, it's better to admit to them than not, which I could see happening. So as hard as it is to say, the standard has to be how many people are dying from it, and how old they are. What are the comorbidities of those things?
The amounts of deaths have started to decrease. So has the amounts of COVID cases.
Yeah.
Now I have to ask a simple question. A lot of people who are starting to feel bad just might be staying home instead of going to the hospital because they tell them to go home. Take flu. You wonder about that. It still may be out here in force. I don't know.
I know a lot of people that went to the hospital, tested positive, and then just sent them home.
Yeah.
I mean, what else are you
I
gonna
know
do
a
with
lot
them?
of my friends that test. My daughter tested positive, and she's 15, and the doctor sent her home. My wife tested positive, and they
so
just
all you
said,
have to do is stop sending them home to pad those numbers.
Yeah.
So that can't be the standard, right?
Yeah.
We went through something like this a couple of years ago where they were doing the LGBTQ club after school, which is fine. Because it's an after-school club activity. But the interesting thing was, and where parents rose up around here over, was they weren't telling the parents that the children were attending.
Yeah.
They were allowing the kids to say, I was at soccer when they were really at this club. Now that's I think where you draw the line. So there is no implied separation between parents and their children.
Well, I mean, here's a couple of things we need to keep in mind. Biden's education secretary said that parents are angry at school board meetings because their guy didn't win last year. Yeah. Now, that's a statement he made. He made a statement that when he was asked about rights in school.
How condescending is that? The only thing that they care so much about their guy winning that they assume the only thing I care about is that Trump didn't win.
Right. He said, ask about writing in school board meetings with citizens criticizing mask and vaccine mandates. That's one of the things that they talk about. And asking questions about critical race theory and diversity, equity. Remember, we've talked about all these. Cordona offered a candid response. I think it's a proxy for being mad at their guy didn't win. Yeah. He conceded that it wasn't entirely different from what happened in 2010 amid the birth of the Tea Party with the Obama administration's support for Common Core. There wasn't a lot of support for Common Core. I looked at Common Core. It was
stupid.
Yeah.
It still is, by the way. They don't use it. They don't really use it much in Florida, but not like they did in the beginning.
And the thing of it was, I just want to say one thing about Common Core, because Wendy was involved in it. Jeb Bush came out and said, "Listen, this is what we want to do. We want to have a core school system policy that goes across the state." Everybody studies the same thing. Everybody does this. Everybody does.
I would suspect they would have that already.
Yeah, you would think that they would. And so he said, and this is what Common Core really started out with. But then the liberals got a hold of it and said, hey, if we're going to require this, let's require equity. Let's require, all these other different things that all of a sudden you go, wait a minute. You just took something that we were just trying to set up standards that now we're adding all these other things. The federal government wants to get in, well, you can't have this unless you do this. Then it just fell apart.
Well, Common Core was illogical. So if I'm honest, I would show my kids how I learned it.
Yeah.
And because I could not sit down and let them explain to me what Common Core's, like they only had to estimate the answer.
Yeah.
And it was a long way to go to get to, it was a much shorter distance to the actual answer than to 254 is a more accurate answer than 250-ish.
Yeah.
Right. So, but that was all they were looking for. So I think they were trying to lower the standard so everybody would succeed. That's the equity of outcome.
Well, there was another thing that happened that, while questioned by Senator Mike Braun, he made that statement. But wait, there was another one here. RNC Research said Biden's Education Secretary Cardona says parents should not be the primary stakeholder in their kids' education. So he was being grilled in Congress, and one of the congressmen said, don't you think that the parent should be the primary stakeholder in the kids' education? And he would not say yes.
Did he say no, or he just wouldn't say yes?
He just wouldn't say yes. He avoided the issue.
And who do they want to blame?
Yeah.
Who do the teachers blame for our failing education system but the parents?
Yeah, they want to blame them.
So they want the glory but not the responsibility that goes along with their role, or perhaps that's the case. So back to Pasco County. So what happened was they were not telling the parents. So the parents began to find out and said, "Hey, we need to be alerted if my child is struggling with same-sex attraction," and the school's policy was no, right? And so we want to see the curriculum. The school policy was no. So here's the crazy thing: the curriculum was the private property of a local psychologist. Therefore they were not legally compelled to disclose the. She was running like her own little private library for these kids. So they were not. It wasn't school board material, so they were not required by law to disclose to the parents what the curriculum was. And so obviously parents got very upset. And I attended some of those debates, and I can tell you the LGBTQ community was very upset too. And the mindset was that the parents were a threat to the children that were struggling with same-sex or gender identity and things like that, same-sex attraction. So it was important to them that they separated the parents from the conversation, because the parents could go home and kill the kid or beat the kid for having same-sex attraction or being gender confused. And so that was their defense of why they were doing it. Not a good defense, by the way. It's ridiculous. No. So, and here we see again on a national level, the state thinking that we are somehow more intellectually evolved, more qualified to raise your children than you are.
Right.
And this would be, for me, the big problem. So if you want to come, you're not going to come between me and my children.
Right. Well, during the time that we were doing Zoom school, parents were looking over the shoulder and watching what the kids were being taught. Teachers went and complained that they didn't want the teachers, and this was in different states, did not want the parents watching what was going on, and wanted a requirement, like a state law passed that said, you can't watch when we're teaching. Now, that just sounds crazy. If you're not trying to hide something, you would invite the parents in. It does not make any sense to me that. And
COVID has helped that. So my kids' school, they go to a charter school, which would have Democrats up in arms, except for in Florida. But my kids both go to one goes to a technical high school that you got to apply for and get into. Mm-hmm. It's a public school. And one goes to a charter school. And I've noticed the interesting thing is, it used to be they would say, oh, you just show up whenever you want. I mean, you have access to your children all day here on campus. But as soon as COVID hit, now they got a bell and a camera at the door. Yeah. And a school resource officer lets you in or doesn't let you in. So So now the creepy thing is, on the other side of that fence, I don't know what's going on. Now my kids are older, and they would tell me. My kids are more conservative than I am. But but here at the church, what if I didn't allow parents into the kids' church? How freaked out would they be if they were locked out? If I had their kids behind a locked door and they couldn't see what was going on. Right. So we keep one door unlocked with a staff member on the other side of the door. We have cameras and everything, and you're also separated. You've seen our facility. You're separated from the kids, even once you're in the kids' building. But you can see the kids, right? So we're not beating or doing anything horrible with your kids. So, I believe, because I apply it here at my place, that the parents have that right. Sure. Right? Now, some parents aren't allowed to take their kids. We let the sheriff's office figure that out. But they don't have that mindset. Their mindset is, and you remember Hillary Clinton's during the Obama administration, a friend of hers was running Department of Education, whatever, and she came out with a public service announcement basically talking about that we have to stop looking at children as the parents' children and start looking them as our community children. And the way they worded it sound wonderful. But what they're saying is we should have more say as a government in how kids are raised than the parents who birth them.
Right. Well, I think what we're seeing a continuation of the Obama era, because, and I think that the National School Board, these people have emboldened themselves, because if we look at what happened during the Obama era, where they went against Tea Party, organizations who were trying to get 501c3 status, and they were rejecting them and investigating them,
dragging their feet, and slow walking it.
Yeah, all these different things that were going on. The IRS scandal. It was just
and Benghazi, all in the same year, by the way.
Benghazi didn't have anything to do with the school board of parents. I mean, trust me, Benghazi was bad enough.
Well, you see their commitment to their political power in those three things.
Listen, we could go down the list, the Fast and Furious, where that was a debacle, because they were selling fully automatic weapons to bad guys on the other side of the border.
Never got them back, yeah.
And didn't track them, just lost them. And so when one was used that killed one of our Border Patrol agents, that's when this became, aware. Because here's what they were trying to do. They were trying to show that the guns that were being used in the drug cartel business, when they got involved with shootings with Border Patrol agents or any law enforcement, they were trying to show that the guns were bought here in America. That's where they got them. Yeah. So, AR-15s or assault rifles are bad. Fully automatic is terrible. And they wanted to kind of see, we told you we needed to get rid of these. But when we found out about it, they were the ones selling them to the cartels. They were selling them to the illegal aliens. So, I mean, when we get into things like this, when you have these shadow things that go on in government, you question what is going on.
It's a government, honestly, since Bush, since 9/11, it's been harder and harder to trust this government. And they're asking us to trust them with some pretty important things, our First Amendment, our Second Amendment, our children. But I don't trust them as far as I could throw them. No. So then why would and then I look at people that do trust the government out of hand, right? So long as it's their guy in power. And I don't think that politics has become like a religion to a lot of people.
Politics has gotten, I mean, seriously, I
wish my Christians were as committed to their faith, their salvation, as my friends are committed to their political views.
We might see some changes in the country if they were. Yeah. Yeah, they'll get up and down and march for a, whatever their belief is.
So here's the thing. Someone on the left would say we're overreacting to this. I watched a hearing between two people who, tell you the truth, I didn't know who they were. One was a congressman, and one was a lady from Department of Justice, representing the Department of Justice. And she would not define the terms harassment or threat, or give an example of any of it. Like they didn't say like what happened in Ottumwa, Iowa. They had no example of any laws being broken. Yet the Department of Justice agreed to use the FBI to keep an eye on parents and put them on the domestic terrorist list, which I'm guessing under the national security stuff would limit their constitutional rights.
Would limit a lot of things. Traveling. I mean, there's a whole bunch of things that, just think about it. And see, this is how bad they are. Let's say that they put Kevin Haggerty on the domestic terrorist list. How many people are going to come to your church? Because it's going to leak out. It's going to leak out. You might get all new members, because you might get preppers and things like that, that, oh, man, Kevin's one of us. Let's show up, But how bad is that? Let's say, for instance, you work in a bank, a respectable businessman that goes to a school board meeting and
even loses his temper.
Yeah, well, listen, I've been in school board meetings. It's easy to lose your temper because of the simple fact. I'm going to go back to the basic thing that we've been talking about. It goes along the line with it takes a village and all these things like that. They want to constantly tell us, and this has been going on for a while, they want to constantly tell us that they know what is better for our children than we do. And listen, let me just add to this. When college started going liberal, what the professors would say, listen, let the high schools teach them. Then when they come to college, we'll make them ours. Well, now they're not having to do that anymore because those that the college took and made them left-leaning are now teaching in our schools, especially the school board. Let's be realistic. They support Democratic candidates. They don't support Republican. I mean, go do your own checking on this.
Well, they not only teach that Republicans are racist, and by the way, American history shows that Democrats were the party of slavery and of segregation. Yeah. But besides that, they've been taught, and they across the board believe they're not evil but deceived. Does that make sense? So, but here's the thing: we're taking these 25-year-old kids that are still living with mom, have no intention of getting a job or being productive. Their dedication, their passion is to overthrow a corrupt capitalist government, because this is what they're being taught in colleges and high schools.
Well, yeah, I'll give you a good example of this. My daughter and I were out walking around. We were down in Venice, Florida, which is a really rich neighborhood. I mean, it is, there's a lot of money there. My daughter's been to Africa twice, okay? So as we're walking around an outdoor mall waiting to go to a restaurant, there's all these fountains where this water's, just pouring out. And my daughter looks around and goes, capitalism is bad. And I said, well, wait a minute here. Let's table that thought for a second. Let's sit down and talk about this. So I sat down with her and I said, look, I understand, because here's what she said. African countries are dying for water, and we have fountains. I mean, like, I counted 5 fountains in this little strip mall.
They're using the same water over and over again.
I know. But that really isn't the point.
Yeah.
The point is, I looked at her and I said, gluttony is bad.
Yeah.
I said, if you don't know what a rich person is doing with their money, you have to be kind of careful with that statement. That falls underneath the impression that everybody wants to give you. Oh, the rich don't give enough. Are we serious about this? There's a lot of organizations that have been created that help people all over the world that started off by rich people because they had the money to do it. So I said, but when people buy a handbag for $7,000, because I've seen one of those, or buy a watch, that costs $12,000, I think that falls into a little bit of gluttony. I mean, I really do.
As you begin to make it more and more, and you enjoy the successes of a free market, do you raise your standard of living, or should you raise your standard of giving, or both to some extent? Are you entitled to both, inside and outside of the church?
I was watching a guy who makes a lot of money, and he's a Christian, and he was talking about he works with Christian businessmen. And this Christian organization set up the budget for each other.
Yeah.
This is how much money you can live comfortably on. This is what your salary, your base take.
And this is what you can pour into the kingdom.
And this is what you can pour into the kingdom.
Yeah.
And see, when you look at things like that, because I think about that all the time. I am so blessed with what I have. I'm not, in the days before, where we were scrounging for food, I'm so comfortable right now that it doesn't hurt me. Or when Wendy comes to me and says, I want to support a child in Africa, for so much a month, I go for it, do it, whatever we can do to help. But when I explained it that way to my daughter, she goes, well, why doesn't everybody think of it this way? I said, listen, there's gluttony in everything you look at.
And there's emotional and spiritual gluttony too. By the way, it's not just food and money.
Sure.
So it is not.
But it's what they're training our kids at school.
Yeah. Well, we've been misled, and the Bible's been misquoted so many times. But it's not money that's the root of all evil. It's the love of money. Yep. It is that if you put that money above your salvation, above your relationship with your Creator, then it is a problem, right? It can no longer be from God or of God, or at least it's been corrupted by the spirit of the Antichrist at that point.
The parable of the rich young ruler. I mean, that's a good parable right there, because Christ knew what would stop him. Yeah. Hey, you need to be practicing the law. Okay, I do that. You need to be this. I can do that. But when he said, sell everything and come and follow, give it to the poor and come and follow me, he already knew.
Yeah, he knew the answer was going to be. Yeah. And the question wasn't posed for the benefit necessarily of the rich young ruler, but for the apostles that are listening to it, right? So
but I got to read something here. It talks about some of these cases that we're talking about, okay? In Minden, Illinois, this month, a 30-year-old man was arrested and charged with battery and disorderly conduct after striking a school board member at a meeting. Okay, I would say
That's something. Yeah, that's breaking the law.
But local law enforcement should be handling this. Local law enforcement, and we see local law enforcement in there. Now, the 2 school board meetings in Michigan were disrupted when a person yelled and gave a Nazi salute in protest of mask requirements, the group said. Okay. Yeah.
Well, they weren't supporting Nazism. They were calling the school board Nazis, basically.
Exactly right. Arguing that the actions could amount to a form of domestic terrorism and hate crime.
No.
Okay, I don't see that.
So, the word Nazi is thrown around. I've heard people say you're worse than Hitler. They said it to Dennis Prager. And,
well, they called Donald Trump, worse than Hitler all the time.
So did they have a real grasp of who Hitler was, or who Stalin was, or who Mao Zedong was? I mean, these are not just jerks, right? They weren't just people that sent out mean tweets. These people that killed millions of people
were mass murderers.
Yeah. And so but we've talked about it before, but if you can objectify people's character, then it becomes okay to do whatever you want.
Yeah.
And so this is a slippery slope. You brought up a good point. Why isn't local police taking care of this? Why does a already suspect federal government have to weaponize against parents, or give the air of weaponizing the FBI, which they did against Trump, by the way? Yeah. You call these people domestic terrorists, and then is it okay to get FISA warrants on them? Do they no longer have our protection from illegal search and seizure because they're on a domestic terrorist list? It changes things.
Well, I just...
And how hard is it to get on that list? That's a good question to ask.
Let me just add one other thing here when we talk about the school board. And it's the NBSA, National Board School of Education. What is it? I can't...
Got it at the top here.
Yeah.
NSBA, National School Board Association.
Yeah. Let's just talk about them for a second. When the CDC was coming out when the CDC was putting out their requirements on what schools should do, what people didn't realize is that the NSBA was dictating what they wanted to the CDC. So the CDC came out and said, hey, whatever, barriers, all these different things like this, has to be vaccinated, blah, 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 all these different things. Everything that they put in there was something that the NSBA had already put in a memo to all the teachers. The CDC picked it up. Now, they weren't listening to science. They truly were not listening to science.
Well, they're under a lot of political pressure. Not the NSBA, I don't know how powerful they are, but certainly the teachers union is one of the most powerful demographics politically in our country.
Well, I do believe that that's them right there, the teachers union, the National School Board Association.
It's the NEA or something like that.
NEA, yeah.
So this happens to be, but I'm sure they're lockstep together. But these people, this is my problem with unions, including teachers unions and police unions. My whole 9/11 theory. The idea that we needed smaller class sizes was not to be more effective educators, but it was to have more teachers. The problem, and therefore a more powerful union, twice as powerful if you're cutting the classroom in half. But the problem there is we diluted the talent pool of teachers, just like after 9/11. I think we may have diluted the talent pool of police officers. Not everybody that is a police officer has the temperament or psychology to be a police officer. Now, that doesn't mean they can't be other things, but have we diluted the talent pool for teachers? Are we seeing more teachers in inappropriate relationships with students? Have we lowered the bar too far in two key jobs in our country, teachers and police officers? That would be my worry.
I mean,
if we need to go from 30,000 teachers to 60,000 teachers, if the major leagues went from 32 teams, Major League Baseball, to 1,000 teams, how would the pitching talent be?
Yeah.
Right? Are there enough people that are predisposed, anointed, gifted in the pitching department to keep, everybody would be batting 800, 900.
Sure.
Because the pitching would suck.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
So and is that then, could that not be the case with these overpowerful unions?
Well, I really worry about where we're going on this, because to even put out that memo, I mean, they're going to make examples at January 6th. Yeah. We can all agree that was wrong. They should not have done that.
But it wasn't an insurrection.
It wasn't an insurrection.
I think if it was, all the people with the guns left their guns home for the big insurrection. Yeah. And then they broke into the Capitol building and then walked out.
Yeah, the one person that was killed was
killed by the government.
Was killed by the government.
And I think the people on the right, if they do, and I'm not saying they won't plan an insurrection, pretty sure they'll be successful, or shockingly successful at least, because they know how these are ex-cops, ex-military, oath keepers, people like that, that are equipped and trained to violence, right?
Right.
So they are. I think they would be successful to some degree if they did. If that was actually an insurrection, we'd be having a very different conversation right now.
Sure, we would be. And you know, we look at Antifa, we look at the riots in all the different states over the Summer of Love, and all the different things that happened, the destruction that was done. I mean, there's been organizations that have done comparison between the two. You know, like how much destruction was over here and how much was destruction.
Yeah, autonomous zones.
Yeah.
Here's a big problem. Why did we not have the FBI rounding up the terrorists that were burning our cities all summer, or creating autonomous zones? Why are they still free? And why were our politicians bailing them out when they were incarcerated or were arrested? And then so why was that a mostly peaceful snenario? But so far you gave one example of somebody assaulting somebody.
Yeah.
I'm guessing they got in a scuffle of some sort. But does that then warrant the FBI getting involved in local politics, basically?
Well, I think
I have a crazy solution, by the way. We'll unpack it here in a minute.
Okay. I really think that this scares me more than anything else, because as big as an organization is, of the NSBA, the NEA, all those others that are out here. I mean, there's a whole bunch of different ones that are out here. But as powerful as they are, and you know, the Secretary of Education, it tells us that the parents are not the primary person for their children's education, the primary, you know, beneficiary.
It's Orwellian. It's amazing how close George Orwell was. He wrote that book in the 40s, 1984.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
How close he was to what was going on right now.
We're studying Romans, and I was reading an article by a guy that was talking about, you know, is this the end times? Because we talk about all these different things like that. And he was talking about social media and all these things, and it was 20 years ago he wrote it. And he didn't write it here in the United States, but it sounded like the United States. He was writing about it in Singapore, which is a rich nation also, you know, fairly rich. Yeah. But it was just, you know, we're going down this slippery slope that it appears that everybody's starting to wake up.
And here is, so that's a good segue to folding this into how would we advise the church, right, Christians, how to deal with this. What's happening is they are lowering the definitions for things that we can all agree on, so that when the time comes to persecute the things we don't agree on, the definition, it suits the definition. So they've taken hate out of the hate speech, right? So right. While we're all against hate speech, we can't call, if everything's hate speech, then nothing is hate speech. So we're slowly but surely being conditioned to accept some of this insanity. So I would tell, and I do tell my people, you need to use your God-given gift of discernment. The secular world would call it human agency, right? Your ability to review facts and come up with a reasonable, logical conclusion. You don't need me to do that for you. You don't need the government to do that for you. Your responsibility as a parent, as a Christian, is to use that gift of discernment yourself. And wherever you land, I mean, obviously, if you disagree with me, you're wrong. But I'm kidding. But you've been given that gift of discernment. You need, to some degree, you need to apply it. You can't just trust that your buddy on Facebook believes this, so I believe it too, because I trust and like my buddy on Facebook, because he may be he may be somewhat deceived as well. So Christians need to approach these things. The caveat I would give for a Christian would be, if anything, being that we are in this world but not of this world, is the attack on the family, the division within the family that they're trying to create. And it may be tough to get on this domestic terrorist list today, but 5 years from now, it may not be that hard.
Under the current administration, I think people like you and I will be on this list.
We would qualify for it.
Yeah.
So if I preach marriages between one man and one woman, that could, by these weak, watered down definitions, that could mean that I am that my saying that, or the Bible saying that, for that matter, is hate speech. It's violent speech. And it is, if I'm not calling for people to do violence against the LGBT community, I'm setting the stage for them. I'm justifying the violence, and so the things that may not affect us right now or seem trivial right now won't be trivial 5 years from now or 10 years from now. So we need to be cognizant of the decline of our civil liberties as Christians now, so we are prepared. We can't just be sitting around shocked. These things happen slowly and then all of a sudden, right? We can't just be all of a sudden shocked and what do we do? Let me run to my pastor who hasn't exercised his gift of discernment either, or who has in fact introduced some of these things into his gospel message.
Well, we've watched the woke pastors out here with critical race theory. I mean, we saw the Southern Baptist Convention try to slip it in. Listen, if we don't get it, it has come to a time when people have to start to get involved with local and national politics.
Here's my genius idea. You ready?
All right, I'm ready.
And I know you're thinking he's a plumber, so he's probably really smart. But what if, and this may be somebody else's idea, I have no idea. I haven't really looked into it. But what if we got rid of any kind of federal income tax at all, as far as us paying it? Every state collected an income tax to cover their needs within the state, and then kick up for the common welfare. So everybody would have to kick a vig up to the federal government for the military and whatever programs we need to unite us, right? So it would do away with things like the Department of Education on a national level, by the way. So it may never happen. But here's the interesting thing, or the cool thing about that idea, is the federal government would then be beholden to the state rather than the state being beholden to the federal government. So the federal government says, you want $1 billion, state of Florida, teach critical race theory. You want $1 billion, state of Florida, mandate masks.
Right.
And then how does the governor, and our governor DeSantis is doing a good job, but how is it a governor can turn that down, especially with the corruption, the political machine living and being fueled by that money?
Well, we have two standouts right now, on this $5 trillion thing that's going on, and Kristen Sinema is one of the holdouts, and yet on last week she had a woman follow her into the bathroom, one of the pro Build Back Better people, and said, "How can you not vote for this? And if you don't vote for this, remember, we voted you in, we'll take you out." Right. Same type of thing that said. She's videoing her in the bathroom, which is against the law, but yet she's not listed as a terrorist.
Or is she listed as a domestic terrorist? My guess is no, because she shares the I remember at the beginning of the whole Russia thing, how they talked about Comey and the FBI as being beyond reproach. Republicans and Democrats both said it, and I believed it, that these people are separate and beyond reproach when it came to political issues. And clearly, we know now, without a doubt, that that's not true, that we have a very politicized national law enforcement, right?
Yeah.
And just a horrific for the American people dynamic that anybody on either side of the aisle should be horrified by the idea that we would use the IRS or we would use the FBI or any of our federal agencies to crush our political opponents. That shouldn't be okay with anybody, but it's okay.
That shouldn't even be discussed. Yeah. I mean, that should be at the highest level of where the President of the United States says, "What are you doing?"
And now they do it, and they're beyond reproach. They know if Trump era told us anything, is that our government is out of our control.
Right.
They know they don't no longer have to hide these things because they know no one's holding their feet to the fire.
Right. Biden, in his political speeches when he was running for president, said that he would never use the Department of Justice for political issues. And we're seeing it right now. You know, this guy, I'm sorry. I try real hard. I try to respect the position. But this guy just, I mean, over and over and over again has done nothing but lie to us.
And it's true. It's absolutely true. And it's not unique to him. I think it's been –
well,
I think if I was awake the whole time, I would know that that's been going on my whole entire life. But did it not rear its ugly head after 9/11, and did it not show its underbelly after the second election of Barack Obama, where all of a sudden he can do whatever he wanted and his true colors came through?
He did what he wanted when he came.
And created the need or the vacuum that Trump filled. Right. And now I'll go on record saying I'm convinced that they cheated in the 2020 election. I'm absolutely convinced of it. I mean, I think there's enough proof that we need to, like, who's the guy from Texas, the senator that I like, Ted Cruz. He said, let's take some time and figure out that let's return to the people confidence in their electoral system. And the government was like, no way. You know, the rest of them were like, no way. And it was on January 6th that he said it. Yeah. So it got overshadowed by the insurrection.
It reminds me of a call in the NFL, if you watch football, a call in the NFL which is controversial. You see the team that the call would go against running up to the scrimmage line and trying to do a play real quick
so they don't
before the red flag comes out, you know, to review it. I mean, this is I am truly concerned for this country because of what we're seeing that just continues. Listen, we have hurt ourselves in so many different spots. The border is wide open. We have moved all those Haitians out of the border somewhere in this United States. We have brought from Afghanistan members that were not vetted, that they're starting to find out more and more and more that these people had nothing to do.
Some of them have been arrested already.
Yeah. So you know, we just continue, and now here we go again. Let's use COVID as the excuse for people to be upset, and they're just upset over COVID. That's the reason why. No, it's critical race theory. It's all the things, the poison that we're trying to feed.
And they use that, we'll wrap it up here in a minute, but they use that as an excuse for the riots, that these people have been locked up for 5 or 6 weeks. So it's justifiable that they're burning a Foot Locker and looting it. It's just so illogical and so easily embraced by so many people. That's the scary part.
That's not that statement that you said there because they're locked up. My brother in Kentucky, when they had their riot, one of the things that kids were saying, we've been stuck in our house all this time. Hey, somebody's having a protest? Let's go, because it's a peaceful protest that nobody, you know, everybody's showing up. They just want to be out there. Most of the guys were trying to pick up girls. You know, I mean, it was just, you know, let's go party.
The truth is, when I was 15 or 16, if you busted a Foot Locker window, I don't even know if they existed back then, I would have probably went and got some shoes. I mean, I would have been a looter.
When things started to fall apart, you see these kids back off, go home, because they don't want to be involved in this.
Yeah.
But yet we're taking video of everything, and we notice Kevin's there, and Kevin is a radical that wants to do God Logic Project and all these other different things like that. Conservative. Well, guess what? You're now on the radar.
Now you're concerned.
You know?
So I learned an interesting thing the other day. I got pulled over. We'll wrap it up, but I got pulled over by Pasco County, I think, but I was in Pinellas, or it might have been Pinellas. But anyway, they ran my license plate automatically.
Yeah.
So it's always happening. So he didn't say, hey, that guy looks suspicious, and aim his gun at me, or remember they used to drive behind you and run your tag. So I always make buddies with the guys when they pull me over, and so he's like, no, I don't have to do anything. It just tells me that the car right in front of you, it has whatever's wrong with the tag. The guy on the registration has a suspended license. That's not me.
Right.
So it happens automatically. And then for me, I think to myself, well, that's probably going too far. In other words, you would almost need probable cause to run the plate in the first place, right? Like low air, light out, or something like that. I don't know that our police officers should just randomly running people's tags. But that's a civil liberty thing. But what if I was a pedophile or a rapist or a murderer and they ran my tags, and that's how they managed to finally find me, right?
Right.
So for me, I'm like, I would like that to happen, But I worry about these things happening, you know. But
Well,
to be able to run my tag seems to be against the Fourth Amendment without some kind of probable cause for running my tag.
And I think if you dig deeper into that, and what you're talking about is these cameras that they have on the cars that are hitting these tags and automatically running them.
Yeah, he's like, I didn't do it. The car does it.
What I'm going to tell you is the 50 tags it ran before it ran yours.
Might have caught a bad guy.
No, what I'm getting, they probably never knew it.
Oh, yeah, because nothing came up.
Nothing came up. So we have to be careful when we talk about that because it triggers on you because the driver of the vehicle the owner of the vehicle has a suspended license, but yet the 50 other tags that we ran, nothing was going on, so have a nice day.
Yeah. And so, but that goes to the logic of who cares if they read my emails? What do I ever say?
Yeah.
But it's not the I'm not doing anything wrong, so who cares that they read my email? Because the definition of wrong today may be very different in 5 years.
In what I would call a perfect society, to protect you and I, these things are necessary. And we were talking about the Trump at 9/11 when they did the NSA.
Yeah.
The NSA
the
was
Patriot Act and all
the
that.
Patriot Act
did that go too far?
It was used. I mean, it was used. It was used against President Trump. They used it against him
with the FISA warrant.
With the FISA warrants,
But how effective? What's the price we pay? So how effective? We haven't had a real terrorist attack since. So how effective were those things in thwarting terrorist attacks in the last 20 years? Probably pretty effective.
They were very effective. In fact, it's one of these things. Some friends of mine are getting ready to travel over to England. We're getting ready to travel over to England, and they contacted what is it? When you go foreign, like if you go to the embassy, they contacted the embassy, and the embassy said this is not a good time, for Americans to come over here.
Yeah.
And they said it's not a threat against Americans. They have credible information that says something could possibly happen over here. We just hate to have 30 Americans over here that get killed because this does happen.
So it's a catch-22. So my thing that worries me is in the wrong hands, like what we're reading today, these things can be weaponized very easily. So we're not triggered or concerned by the Black Lives Matter Antifa riots of the last 2 years, and even creating autonomous zones that they felt they were not under the authority of the local police anymore. That's no big deal, but parents getting out of hand at a school board meeting could make them a domestic terrorist, which means their civil liberties would then legally be limited. I would think that's what that means.
Well,
otherwise, who cares if you're called a domestic terrorist?
I'm sitting here, as we're talking, going through the stuff that we pulled up, our information, and it's a bunch of websites. And I'm reading a title right now. It says, anybody fighting Joe Biden now is helping Trump's next coup.
Yeah.
I mean, we can't say Trump's next run for the presidency or Trump's next, throwing his hat in the ring. It's the next coup.
If nothing changes, and we'll wrap it up, but if nothing changes, then I say the Republicans never win another national election. I think the left is too powerful now.
Well, I'm going to disagree with you
outside of something happening.
His ratings have dropped so much, and the independents are the ones that we really want to be paying attention. And his ratings in independents have dropped down to almost 30%.
Yeah, but they read the headlines, but they don't read the article for the most part. And so if
somebody's paying attention,
if the next Republican candidate is accused of raping a woman 30 years ago, and that's the headline, and it turns out the article says, well, we don't really know, I think we're in big trouble. I think we're further down this slippery slope than we think we are.
Well, I'm going to pray. I'm going to be optimistic.
Yeah.
I'm going to pray that we woke up the country and said, whoa, wait a minute. This is what we get when we invite a uniter in that truly isn't a uniter.
Yeah.
It hasn't been for years, but that's, listen.
Not being Trump didn't qualify him for the presidency.
Yeah.
And so, and you're talking to a guy, and nobody believes me half the time, but you're talking to a guy that wasn't a huge Trump fan, but I think he did a good job, and I think that I would have loved to have seen a guy like Ted Cruz, and maybe still get it. But I think his days are. He's, what would you call him? A left center Republican, maybe. But I think the guys, the people that will succeed now on the Republican side are going to be the DeSantises, who I don't want to leave Florida. I want him to stay governor. So, final thoughts. What do we tell the church? How do we shepherd our flock through something like this?
Well, the church warns us about these things, and we need to be prepared for it. And I think we didn't get into this a lot, but I think the church is going to be next.
Yeah, I think the church is the goal, by the way.
Yeah, if your church is pro-life instead of pro-choice, you're probably going to get smacked here soon. If your life is not going to allow somebody to come in and use your transgender, use like a male transgender, use a female bathroom, you're going to see a court case. You're going to see something happen, and you're going to start you're going to start hearing the public talk about how terrible the churches are, and they should be put on they're white racists. We've read that. And so I think the churches are next. I think if parents don't pay, we as parents, we as the church have to wake up. We don't go into these school board meetings and say, hey, we're the church and we demand this. We go in as parents. We go in as friends of the parents. We go in as grandparents, and we say, enough is enough.
Yeah.
We just want you teaching our children how to make it in life, and not critical race theory, not transgender. I don't want a guy to go into my girl's shower room. Sorry, you cannot. There's nothing in here that's going to make me feel more comfortable about that. There's nothing you can say.
I think that if somebody followed my I didn't know you and you followed my 15-year-old daughter into a public bathroom, I would follow.
I would be following you.
So for that brief moment, I would be gender confused until my daughter was done using the bathroom. Yeah. So I think we have to get a grip on these things. I think Romans 13, where we're supposed to succumb to government authority because it's of God, I think that's misunderstood. If it's not a godly authority, if it's not a scripture-based godly human rights authority, then it is then none of the characters in Scripture did that, right? Mary and Joseph snuck Jesus to Egypt for a while.
Yeah.
So I think you're going to see. We're running out of storage space already. I think you're going to see. I would like to see power being returned to the state. I think to the states, or as close, even the counties, as close to the people as we possibly can. We have a unique opportunity to do 50 social experiments in this country and see what works. But the first thing we got to do is suck the power out of the federal government.
Yeah,
that's a big thing.
All right,
guys, we love you. What's up? You got to find another thing.
We did not call each other and ask what color shirt we were wearing today.
Yeah, this is every week we do this.
Yeah, I know. And just a disclaimer: Generations Christian Church does not probably approve of some of the things I say. Their opinion, my opinion, may be two different things. So don't be going to the church going,
what's with Jim?
Yeah, what's up with Jim? We're just speaking what we see as men who love Christ and want the best for our families and our children and our country.
And I think if I was coming from a place of hate, or if I felt like you were coming from a place of hate, I'd pull the plug in this whole thing and go our separate ways. So that's never going to be my way of dealing with this. So that's it. We love you guys. You can think of a topic, email us, truechristiantalkinfo@gmail.com. You just need prayer, email us. Glad to talk to you. Hope all is well, and we'll see you next Thursday at, what time do we do the show? 11 o'clock?
11 o'clock,
Next Thursday at 11 o'clock. God bless.
God bless. Be safe.